Good evening, everyone. So lovely to look out to a full house here. This is fantastic. I'm Kate Markert, Executive Director here at Hillwood Estate Museum and Gardens in Washington, D.C. We are very pleased to have audiences joining us, of course, here in the theater, but also by Zoom. So we probably have as many or more people on Zoom as are here in the theater. Now, for those of you who are here in the theater, please make sure you silence your phones so they're not chirping and barking and doing everything. Now, for those of you at home in your jammies, you can submit your question via the Q&A function on Zoom whenever they cross your mind. And we'll get to as many questions as we can at the end, and I'm sure there will be many. Those of you who are here in the theater, please wait until the microphone comes around so that the people on Zoom can hear your brilliant questions. And then we will, as I said, get to as many people as possible. I'd like to take this moment to acknowledge those who have made the additional commitment to support Hillwood as members of our Legacy Council. Many, many thanks for your thoughtful planning to help ensure a vibrant future for Hillwood. Now, tonight's program is the second part of a three-part lecture series highlighting our current exhibition, On Time, Giving Form to the Fleeting. And then be sure to join us next week for our final lecture. That's on March 31st. Our antiquarian horologist, Brittany Nicole Cox, will trace the origin of her craft across time and objects, tools and stories. And those of you who've seen the exhibition have seen there's a video of Courtney, she calls herself Nico, Brittany Nicole Cox. She's worked on several of the timepieces that are in the exhibition, as well as the tall case clock in the mansion, and she has fascinating stories to tell. So I really encourage you to come back next week and hear her. There's still tickets available for that, so you can visit Hillwood's website and reserve them. Now tonight, we're very excited, all of us, to hear from Eric Wind for this talk exploring the history of the wristwatch, as well as how to collect them. That's probably why you're here, right? How to collect them. I know that. Yeah. There are several pieces on loan from Eric in the exhibition. So if you haven't had a chance to see the On Time exhibition yet, please be sure you come back soon. It'll be here until June, so you've got plenty of time to come back, bring friends, have lunch. Now, before I turn over the mic, I wanted to share a little bit about Eric, although I think most of you are his friends, right? So you probably all know. Just kidding. Eric Wind is one of the world's leading experts on vintage watches. He founded Wind Vintage, a company he started in 2017. That is dedicated to offering exceptional watches for sale and providing advisory services for top collectors around the world. Eric previously served as Vice President, Senior Specialist of Watches for Christie's. Eric holds an MBA from the University of Oxford and a BS in Foreign Service cum laude in International Politics from Georgetown University. Now please join me in welcoming Eric Wind to the podium.
Thanks to all of you for coming. It's been wonderful to visit Hillwood. I'm staying across the street, and it's been a really wonderful visit. What a beautiful place. This is a kind of a difficult lecture. I have 45 minutes to convey to you the history of wristwatches in the 20th century and how to collect them, both of which I would say you've got to give yourself a real 10 years to really master. But we'll do our best. I would like to thank Lauren Cummings as well for connecting me. She is a former classmate of mine at Georgetown. Lauren and I were both in the Philademic Society there, which is, well, I think one of the oldest, if not the oldest, collegiate debating society. So it's wonderful. Thank you, Lauren, for the connection, and thank you to Kate for your hospitality. I'm staying in her basement, so it's good. I can't turn down a free room, so there you go. This is the talk. I'm going to, in one slide, tell you the history of watchmaking up to the 20th century. You have the sun is the original timekeeper, if you will. So you have actually in the dacha, if you want to call it that, where the on-time exhibition is, part of a sun clock, shadow clock, as they called it. That's on loan from the Metropolitan Museum. You had Egyptian water clocks. Then, starting around the 15th century, you could really have the beginnings of mechanical clocks, watches. I'm going to avoid clocks. You should definitely come to the talk next week or stream it by Nico if you can, who's an amazing watchmaker, clockmaker. So that's the history until the 20th century. I did want to
stream what?
the talk next week you can watch as well by Nico. Yes. This is a watch that's actually at the Smithsonian American History Museum. It was made by George Chatterton. It's signed Springfield, Illinois. I just wanted to throw this in here. This was kind of a neat thing. I remembered when this happened. This was Abraham Lincoln's watch, kind of his daily driver, if you will, to use the car term for watches. He had purchased this when he was probably a lawyer in Springfield. Within the family of this watchmaker, Jonathan Dillon, they had said that on the watch there was an inscription made by their ancestor when he serviced the watch during the Civil War, during Abraham Lincoln's presidency. So I remember when the Smithsonian decided to open the watch, the press was there and like everyone was there. I think this was around 15, 16 years ago, to see if there was in fact anything engraved. And there was a lot of engravings on the inside. It was basically Jonathan Dillon. He was the watchmaker. He was servicing it when the attack at Fort Sumter happened. He didn't know how to spell Fort Sumter. He added the P there. But it was attacked by rebels on the above date, J. Dillon, April 13th. Then what was funny, he said, "Thank God we have a government," also. And then, funnily enough, there were two other inscriptions, one from another watchmaker. So it was probably serviced in 1861, then 1864 by L.E. Groffs. But then someone basically put in like a graffiti Jeff Davis. So maybe Groffs was actually a Confederate sympathizer. But Lincoln was carrying this watch around with Jeff Davis's name engraved on the inside and had no idea. So that's funny. I wrote an article about all the watches of the presidents back around 2014 that you can read on Hodinkee. That was a watch owned by President Johnson. So the birth of the wristwatch, there is so much kind of lore around it and storytelling. There was a wristwatch made for the Queen of Naples that Breguet made in the early 19th century. We have no record of what that looked like. Breguet decided to make a kind of a reissue anyways, despite having no data about that, called the Rainha de Naples, or Queen of Naples. We talk about Alberto Santos Dumont, who was a Brazilian-French aviator, who supposedly the Cartier Santos was made for around 1904. We don't have any record of that watch or any photos of him, so we don't really know if that was his watch. We do have at least a Santos going back to 1912. The adoption of the wristwatch really came about from pocket watches that were not as useful during trench warfare in the First World War, because you couldn't really pull that out, and then you're timing, running across enemy lines, etc. So they would basically welded kind of primitive lugs onto these pocket watches and then put leather straps or bracelets or things like that on them. This comes from a great YouTube documentary that I was part of that's on YouTube called Time Machines. It's got a lot of views, so that's good. Over 100,000 views. But if you want, it's a fun little primer about the collecting wristwatches, etc. We'll jump right into a Cartier, which is General John J. Pershing's Cartier from 1917. This was quite an interesting discovery when this came to auction about a year ago at Sotheby's. This came from the Pershing family. And this is another one of those kind of, the lore was that the Cartier tank, the original one in 1917, was given to General John J. Pershing, also known as Blackjack, by Cartier or by the French for helping them out during World War I. We have no record of that watch or anything about it, and probably that watch was in fact this watch, which was given to him by colleagues. And it sold for just over $100,000 at auction, like I said, about a year and a half ago. So that's one of the first kind of wristwatches that we know of made by Cartier.
What kind of gold is that?
I think 18 karat yellow. Yeah. This was a very cool Patek that I found. It came from the original family. I found it a few years ago. This was an interesting watch because it was so raw. It came out of Vermont, and it had the name J.E. Barbie. It came from his family, Captain John Edward Barbie. I forgot the John. But this was an interesting watch because the case was made of platinum, but it was made by a company called Cress Aero, which was a Northeast company. They made platinum jewelry and cases. And probably the movement started life in a pendant watch, and then he commissioned it to be made into a wristwatch as he was about to head to Europe. And it was just a very cool watch. That bright material on the dial is called luminous material. This was radium from that period of time, which has a half-life of thousands of years. Some people are very scared of it. There's famously the radium girls who in I think Syracuse or somewhere around here, maybe it was New Jersey, they would lick the paintbrushes when they were painting the dials. This could have been done by them, in fact, because it was done in the U.S. Yes?
Does the watch this old, does it still run?
It was serviced and ran perfectly.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was interesting. Not the most collectible watch for two reasons. One, a lot of people are afraid of radium now, and radiation and radon gas it emits, etc. Two, it wasn't actually made that way by Patek Philippe in Switzerland, but it was cool. He had it made for going off to World War I in that period of time. This is an interesting watch that was just discovered about a year and a half ago as well. Some of you have heard of Selfridges in London, the famous kind of store, general store. The owner of Selfridges ordered this Patek Philippe around 1929. He ordered it. He received it. He gave it to a gentleman named Sir Henry Seagraves, who was one of the leading auto racers and speed kind of testers at that time, who did it both on water and land. He had, in fact, then wore it when he was setting a speed record on water, but had a violent crash. He died. Mr. Selfridge got it back. Then he lent it to Amelia Earhart. She had it in the mid-1930s. She's wearing it in this photograph, in fact. And then everyone, including Mr. Selfridge, thought she was wearing this when she passed away. And disappeared in 1937. If she passed away, we don't know, but disappeared at least. Maybe she's still alive somewhere. Everyone, including Mr. Selfridge, who had the watch, thought she was wearing this, but there was some photographic evidence that came out showing her wearing a different watch. And this watch had been in an American family for over 60 years, and recently was found by a dealer in Texas, and then he consigned it to auction, and it sold for $1.8 million. So it's pretty special watch. Obviously, a fantastic discovery, and it was really cool to go back and find the photos, which some different internet sleuths did to figure out, yes, this was in fact her watch. Very, very rare chronograph.
Are those two different second hands? 30-second even?
Yes. So this is very interesting. This is the minute register right here. So when you activate the chronograph, which is right here, a single button on this version, this will time up to 30 minutes. This will constantly run when it's wound up. It's a manual wind watch. But you can split the chronograph, so you could time theoretically, it was to time two different cars or two different racehorses or two different things that were transpiring. So extremely complicated. You had to be very wealthy to order one of these. I think they only made 6 during a 10-year period for wristwatches with Patek Philippe. So it's a very special watch, pretty incredible discovery. This is the only other pocket watch I will talk about, but I think it's important within the kind of history of watches. This was called the Super Complication, is the nickname for it. Henry Graves Jr., I believe over 20 complications, including a sky chart for his apartment in New York City on Park Avenue so he could track what the sky looked like, because that's a critical function for all of us. But it's just an incredible feat of engineering. In fact, this watch, you could say, is a little bit cursed, because after he received it in 1933, some bad things happened. He nearly threw it in a lake in upstate New York, and then he ended up selling it. It went to a couple other people. Bad things happened to them. Then it went to a gentleman in the Qatari royal family. He ran into debts. Then he had purchased it in 1999 for $11 million. It sold again in 2014, the day before it was coming up for sale, because he owed Sotheby's $75 million. This was one of the objects that was coming back up for sale. He passed away the day before, so then it sold for $24 million. But this was the most complicated watch for over 50 years, from when it was made, 1933, when he took delivery, until about 1989, when Patek Philippe was able to use computers to help them beat this with the caliber 89. So that's just the beautiful aspect of watches. Admiral Byrd was really an incredible explorer. He explored the North Pole, the South Pole, flew over. He spent a huge amount of time in the South Pole as well, record-setting amount of time in Antarctica. He helped invent this watch for flying, where the inner basically disc of the dial rotates for timekeeping. He also was tracking sidereal time, so navigating from the skies, because it's 23 hours and a little bit of time versus 24 hours on the ground. So that was a sidereal watch with the red star above 6 o'clock. Very cool watch that a collector owns. Charles Lindbergh was also inventing his own way of measuring time. He invented the hour angle with Longines. This would allow him to track also time in the sky looking at the sun. And this watch is in the Smithsonian Museum. It was Charles Lindbergh's watch. Incredible piece of history as well, very large. It's like, something you would wear over your jacket, like the Weems as well. Both were really like 47 millimeter watches, huge watches, not something you wear out to dinner, really just a purpose-built instrument to wear over your jacket. Douglas MacArthur purchased this JLC, Jaeger LeCoultre, or as Americans often say, Jaeger LeCoultre Reverso, around 1935 in Geneva. The Reverso is an interesting watch, another kind of purpose-built watch. British officers who were playing polo in India were having trouble with the mallet smashing the crystals on their watches. So they basically came up with the challenge: how can we have a watch where we can still wear it and have it protected during polo? They invented the system where the case itself flips over. Basically, you push it and flip it, and that would protect the crystal when you were playing polo. Because of that kind of blank back, it suddenly became a palette for people to put on initials, coats of arms, etc., and it became extremely stylish. It was kind of the watch for European royalty. The King of England had one. Amelia Earhart actually had received one as a gift commemorating one of her journeys. European royalty all over were buying the Reverso, so it was no surprise MacArthur got this one kind of appropriately, it had a black dial with radium as well. It was kind of a military style version of the Reverso, so he could see the time at night. This watch sold for 87,500 Swiss francs back in 2015 at auction. The JLC Museum purchased it, so they have it. This is another very important Patek Philippe, massive. Count Carlo Felice Trossi was the head of Scuderia Ferrari, which was the Ferrari racing team. He was of Italian royalty. This watch sold for a record amount of money as a wristwatch back in 2008. It sold for 2.3 million Swiss francs. It had been the biggest wrist chronograph made at that time. In 1937, and he also, you can see in the photo, he's wearing it over his jacket, so the idea was you're racing and you can see the time quickly and easily. It's kind of interesting to go then from this in 1937 to this in 1948, which was much smaller Patek Philippe chronograph that was purchased by Joe DiMaggio. These kind of ornate numerals are called Breguet numerals. It was a very popular thing in the United States, specifically Breguet numerals, for whatever reason. Pretty much nowhere else did American Patek clients or other brands make watches with Breguet numerals, but it was extremely popular. Duke Ellington also had a Patek chronograph with Breguet numerals. So this was very cool, and that Joe DiMaggio, obviously one of the most legendary baseball players, had purchased this. It sold when I was at Christie's in 2017 for about $300,000 at that time, and was part of the Patek exhibition as well. 1951, this is a Patek Philippe reference 1518, which is a perpetual calendar. A perpetual calendar accounts for leap years. So you keep it fully wound, it'll add February 29th every 4 years. And also, yeah, and it goes February 28th to March 1st as well. So incredibly complex. This was the first wrist version of a watch by Patek to have a perpetual calendar that was for sale in a serial production amount. So it was just incredible. When you see this watch in person, it's quite small to have that amount of capacity in that watch to account for leap years, plus a stopwatch. So you hit the top button to start timing up to 30 minutes. And it's got a moon phase indicator. So, and it's very special. This was purchased by the Prince of Egypt, Prince Tufik, and was basically spent most of its life in a safe deposit box. He had passed away a few years ago, and it came up for auction at Sotheby's. At that time, the previous record for this example, it's pink gold with a pink dial. They call it like a pink on pink configuration. There are about 15 known. The previous record was around 2 million for one, and this one went for 9.5 million. It was pretty spectacular moment. Also was special because he had retained the original box and papers all the way from 1951. So that added probably a few million. Yes.
How much was it when it was new? Because it appreciated a lot.
Mm-hmm. I think this watch in 1951 was around $5,000.
5,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now 9.5 million.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. So it's spectacular. I took that photo. I'm very proud of that photo. This is another kind of interesting Patek Philippe. So I'm talking about complicated watches. This was Haile Selassie, who was the last emperor of Ethiopia. What's interesting about this as a Patek is it's also not what you think of when you think of a perpetual calendar. This is much more of what you think of, very, simple, beautiful, light-colored dial, in this case pink, sometimes gold. You have this as a military-style dial. Selassie kind of fashioned himself as a military commander. An Italian aviator he was very close with gave this to him as a gift in 1954. Pretty incredible story with this watch. When I was at Christie's, we got a call from a lady in Sudan who had this watch from her father, and the crystal was off of it. It was basically stored in a wooden box for a long time. She flew to Dubai to drop the watch off. I think Christie's paid for the flight when we saw photos of it, and then consigned it to Christie's Geneva. What was very dramatic about it was coming up for auction in November 2015. During the literally 3 days before the auction, the Selassie family wrote to Christie's saying, "This is our watch, this is our property, etc. You can't sell this." Christie's, I don't know if they responded or not. I wasn't part of that, but they basically were like, this lady received it as a gift from her father, who was, I believe, the president of Sudan back in the day, and Selassie had given it as a gift to him. So auction day comes up. It's a Monday morning in Geneva. The watch is coming up in the afternoon session, and during the lunch break, during the middle of the auction, my boss is there, and he has tears in his eyes, and he said they just took our business manager and arrested him and took the watch, basically, to the authorities. And I was like, what? This watch we knew was going to be 7 figures, and it was a core piece of the auction. It was not literally the front cover of the catalog. So it ended up being about over a year of an investigation in the canton of Geneva. And Switzerland is a true federal system where much of the authority lies with the cantons, or essentially states, not as much with the national government or federal government, if you will. So after a long investigation, they ruled that it was rightfully the property of the owner and could be sold. So it came back a year and a half later, May 2017. We were not going to bring the watch on tour anywhere to the United States and have a legal dispute here. We kept it in Geneva. It was not going anywhere outside of that canton. And it sold for $2.9 million. So it's pretty incredible. But perpetual calendar as well, accounting for leap years. No chronograph on this watch. This is an interesting watch, again, with kind of a DC angle. Richard Nixon, at that time, watch collectors were apparently a big constituent group or lobby group. So the National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors, which still exists, he was tasked with going to speak to them as part of the re-election campaign for Eisenhower. And they in turn gave him a Vulcan Cricket, which I own that watch on the right. It may have been his. I found it on eBay. It has the vice presidential seal on it. Whatever. I should have brought it. I meant to grab it, but I forgot it. But what's cool about this watch is it has a mechanical alarm. So this watch, if you wind it up both directions, the crown, you can set it up to basically 11 and a half hours ahead, and it sounds like a cricket when it goes off. And it's pretty loud. I was going to say, when Kate said silence your cell phones, you don't need to silence your crickets. But this...
Still made?
It is. So what's interesting about the cricket, they call it the Watch of the Presidents. Harry Truman received one from the White House Photographers Corps. And Eisenhower wore one frequently. You could see him in the Saturday Evening Post wearing it. Every president through Joe Biden has had a cricket. Almost every president has had one. And they're very special watches, very fun. One of my first watches that I collected was this one when I found it on eBay. So it's very special. Pablo Picasso is here wearing a Rolex GMT Master reference 6542. This is a very cool watch because it was developed in collaboration with Pan Am for their pilots. And it has that little hand with the small triangle tells the 24-hour time. And that was important because you could then turn the bezel to set a second time zone, typically Greenwich Mean Time. And so wherever you were flying, you could track 2 time zones. And we don't know where Pablo Picasso's watch is, but he was photographed in 1960, and the watch is on backwards if you look at his wrist. So who knows why he was wearing it or where the watch ended, but it's part of kind of the fun, aspect of collecting watches. Where did these watches go? It's fun. This is an important spot as well. The Rolex Submariner that Sean Connery wore throughout many of the James Bond movies, but you see it clearly here in Dr. No from 1962. In the books by Ian Fleming, he wears an Explorer based on the description, but in the movie, supposedly Cubby Broccoli, who helped create them, took the watch off his wrist and gave it to Sean Connery to wear. We don't know where this watch is, unfortunately. Sean Connery was asked about it, I think, in his later years. He had no idea. I think Barbara Broccoli doesn't know. But if we did know where this watch was, it could be a $15 to $20 million watch if it was in good condition. So another one of those kind of lost watches. Who knows if we'll ever find it, but, fun thing. This is specifically from around 1956, based on the variation of the text right there, and based on the no hash triangle insert. So this is where you get super nerdy. It's a very rare, minuscule kind of variation of the Submariner from 1956. This is Jackie Kennedy's Cartier tank Normal. She had received it as a gift in 1963. It was made in 1962. She received it from a Polish prince who was a good friend of JFK, and she wore it throughout her life. Was very cool in that it was consigned to Christie's when I was there. We sold it for $379,000 in 2017. Kim Kardashian claimed that she was the buyer of the watch later. I can neither confirm nor deny, but now it's owned by Cartier, so it's very cool, special watch. Funnily enough, the previous owner of the watch, who was on Real Housewives of New York, Carol Radziwill, did a whole thing, I think a podcast and a talk on the moth or something like that, about how this watch is cursed, because after Jackie got it, obviously JFK was killed, and then after Kim Kardashian got it, Kanye went crazy. So, so I don't know. And Cartier now owns it, and they seem to be doing pretty well. So maybe the curse has been lifted.
Why is it called Normal?
So this was the original tank shape, and this is kind of where it goes back to the General Pershing was thought to have the first one, but he probably didn't, because we don't know where that watch is. The idea was this tank is called a tank because it looks like a French Renault tank from World War I if you look at it from the top. Very simple, like square box World War I tank. And these are called brancards on the side that are kind of flat. So the Normal has flat top, basically sides of the lugs, which are like the legs that shoot out where the strap attaches. Later, they came out with the Tank Louis, which most people think of when they think of the tank, and that's where it's curved on the sides versus flat. So that's real niche stuff, but the Normal was basically not made from about the late 70s until 2023 when they reintroduced it, partially because vintage watch fans were wanting the Normal, and like, this is an incredibly kind of powerful, cool shape. So it's fun. But yeah, that was a very special watch, I think. I was very excited to sell it when I was at Christie's. This is an Ed White Speedmaster. The nickname is for the astronaut Ed White. Omega, interestingly enough, this is they're of course known for two things in general, being the watches worn by astronauts, including on the Apollo missions, on the moon, and also for James Bond with Pierce Brosnan starting in the 1990s. I think those are probably the two things people most associate with Omega. The funny thing was, James Reagan, who's still alive, I was fortunate enough to spend some time with him. He lives in Texas. He was in charge of all equipment for the astronauts for use in space with NASA, and he was tasked with finding a watch for use by the astronauts, because until that time, astronauts were bringing kind of whatever personal watches they wanted. Starting with the Mercury 7, they were using kind of different watches for training. Scott Carpenter commissioned Breitling to make a Navitimer, which I'll show in a few slides. That flooded during his kind of when he jumped out of the capsule after he came back to Earth, so that wasn't ideal. That watch was recently rediscovered. completely rusted out on the inside, but very cool looking. So James Reagan did an RFP. He sent it to all the kind of American representatives of watch brands, Rolex, Omega, Hamilton, Longines, Wittnauer. They were combined, and pretty much every brand, at least 15, he sent them out, the RFPs. Only 4 came back. He had written it in such a way that anyone reading the RFP could think this was literally a watch to be used by jackhammer people or people that were driving government vehicles or something completely not sexy, nothing to do with space flight or anything like that. Just an RFP for watches to go to the government. Out of the 15 companies that he sent the RFP to, 4 responded. The first one failed their kind of reading comprehension test because Hamilton submitted a pocket watch. And the whole kind of concept of the RFP was that it had to be worn on the wrist, so that was immediately dismissed. Then you had 3 other brands. Longines Wittnauer submitted a Wittnauer. Rolex submitted a chronograph that we call a pre-Daytona, and Omega submitted the Speedmaster. The Speedmaster was in fact originally designed for auto racing. It came out in 1957, and it was the first watch to have the tachymeter on the bezel, which allows you to track speed around a fixed course. So if you activate the chronograph, which is the stopwatch, and this starts moving, and you do a lap, and it ends right here, you're doing 200 miles per hour if it's a 1-mile track, or 200 kilometers per hour if it's a kilometer track. You could calculate speed. And prior to that, the tachymeters were on the dials and kind of very small, very hard to read, not so easy to read if you're going 150 plus miles per hour. So Omega said, let's put it on the bezel. It'll be much easier to read if it's not on the dial and it's outside of the crystal. Yes?
I saw in a different presentation that when you went to get the watches, the ones that were submitted, you actually went out and you had someone go out and purchase them at a retail outlet and bring them back, and those are the actual watches that they tested.
He told me a different story. He's still alive, so we can email him if you like. I have his email. But he basically sent the RFP out. This story is, there's always, like I say, all this folklore around stuff. But the Omega basically survived. They froze the watch. They heated the watch up. They were slamming the watch. There's kind of an interesting design with the dust cover on the inside of the movement that allowed it to absorb shocks much easier than other watches where the movement's screwed directly into the case. So really it was the shock test that helped preserve it and helped it win. Very kind of, obviously the designers of the Speedmaster were thinking more about shocks of auto racing and driving around bumps and things, but a pretty incredible design. So that Omega didn't even know what their watch was going to. They had a retailer agent called Norman F. Morris in New York that was essentially their U.S. agent. And then the cover of Life magazine came out with Ed White wearing it, and they about had a heart attack and told Switzerland, look, our watches are being worn on the cover of Life, and Ed White was the first to wear it. He had, in fact, 2 on his wrist on these long Velcro straps. For timing, that was the first American spacewalk at that time. So that's the kind of famous photo. Ed White unfortunately died during testing of the Apollo 1 mission with the watch on. So the watch was, I think, destroyed during that time. But, it's again, like always researching, there was an auction back in the 1990s where supposedly Ed White's son had this watch, which was then sold. I was trying to find that watch when I was at Christie's because we were doing a Speedmaster auction, and I contacted the auction house where it was sold because they claimed it was the watch from Ed White from the spacewalk, and they said, that auction house had gone defunct. I said, do you have any old computers with customer information or anything? Do you know where this watch went? And they looked around and they had no idea. So I don't know who has it, if it'll ever reemerge, or if it is in fact a hoax. I talked to Omega about it. They felt it was a hoax, that the watch wouldn't have survived the fire. But again, this is all kind of the mystery of collecting. We don't really know.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just want to remind everyone, please hold your questions to the end.
I
because
like the questions,
no,
though, I guess, but
the
yeah,
folks
it's kind
on
of
the
fun.
live stream cannot hear your questions.
It's true,
So
yeah,
if-
yeah, the
if you
people at home can,
If you
yeah.
wouldn't mind, just hold your questions until the end, until you can
That's
get this
perfect.
microphone, so the folks at home can hear you.
That's
Thank you.
perfect. Time is really flying, I must say. I was like, wait, what? Okay. 1967, Eric Clapton was wearing a Universal Genève Tri-Compacts, famously out with Jimi Hendrix, going to some pubs in London. Universal Genève is actually being born again at Watches and Wonders next month. They're doing their official relaunch. I'm on the advisory panel of the company. But this is nicknamed the Eric Clapton because he wore it. Kind of appropriate. He was part of the band Cream at this time, and it kind of has a cream-colored dial. And Eric's kind of has been a very noted watch collector throughout his life. But I wonder if he still has this watch. I think some people asked him if he had it, and he had no idea where it went. But pretty cool watch. This also has a moon phase. The difference is it's not a perpetual calendar, so it's a little bit less complicated, but it's a chronograph as well for stopwatches. It goes up to 12 hours, and it obviously has the full calendar, complete calendar. This is a Rolex that was nicknamed the Paul Newman Daytona because Paul Newman famously wore this watch for many years. It's a reference 6239 with a steel bezel. It's the very first version of Daytona, which came out in 1963. The Daytona, originally called the Le Mans, but Rolex decided that was too hard for Americans to say, and America was kind of the big watch market, so they very quickly pivoted to Daytona and put that on the dial. Paul Newman had received this watch from his wife, Joanne Woodard, in 1969. This watch that's on his wrist he wore until about 1985, when he was building basically a tree fort or tree house in the back of his home in Connecticut, and his daughter's boyfriend, James Cox, was there. Paul convinced James to help him build this tree fort in the back, and he noticed James wasn't wearing a watch in all likelihood. He asked James what the time was. James said, "I don't have a watch, I have no idea what the time is." Paul took it off his wrist, handed it to James, and said, this watch keeps pretty good time if you remember to wind it, because he had to wind it up once a day, essentially, manual wind watch. James had it. It's engraved actually on the back, so it's like quite a sentimental thing. It basically says, "Drive slowly, me being Joanne," giving it to Paul. She had probably purchased it at Tiffany and Company in 1969 at the end of this movie Winning. That is where they met, I think, and they were both starred in that movie. James wore it intermittently. He broke up with the Newman daughter, but he had the watch. He was wearing it at an airport in the 1990s, and a Japanese guy came up to him and started pointing at it, going, "Paul Newman, Paul Newman." And James goes, "What? Like, how does this guy know that this is Paul Newman's watch?" In fact, basically in the 1980s, the birth of watch collecting, particularly in Italy, people began finding these photos of Paul Newman wearing this watch with this dial, very distinctive white dial with black registers, and these kind of square indexes. That any Rolex Daytona with those square indexes that's vintage is called a Paul Newman. That's how you separate a regular Daytona versus the Paul Newman. The idea was if you're car racing, it was easier to track time with the little boxes in the registers. So that watch had gotten very popular, but James had no idea. Fast forward to 2017, James realizes it's worth real money based on what a friend said. At least $1 million, maybe $3 million. Comes up for auction in New York, October 2017. The opening bid is $10 million, the very first bid. And then it's an incredible back and forth. I was in the room. It was pretty epic, and it went for $17.6 million. James was the primary beneficiary, but he gave some amount of money to his ex-girlfriend, and they were on good terms for her charity. And James bought a modern Rolex Submariner, and the rest was history. So that's good. So pretty special, pretty special. This is also kind of a similar looking watch. If you want to see a real one, you can see my friend Owen Berger, who's in high school here, wearing one. Joe Siffert, or Joe Siffair, as the French might properly say, I think, was a Swiss auto racer, and he had this watch in 1969 when it came out. It was one of the first automatic chronographs, so it wound with the movement of your wrist. It took many, many years to try to have a chronograph that could be automatic, if you will, wound with the movement of your wrist. So this is a very cool and special watch. Shout out to Owen, who's a young, passionate watchmaker here in his free time when he's not in school. And Owen has a standing offer to come join Win Vintage after he completes high school at a 6-figure salary. So not too many high schoolers have this, but he's just been a great friend. And you cannot get his phone number because he's got a backlog of watches for me to work on. Miles Davis, another chronograph with a stopwatch complication. Here he is wearing a Breitling Navitimer. Miles had a lot of interesting, cool watches. The Navitimer was also an important watch for pilots, and like I said, Scott Carpenter had used a variation of this with 24-hour time that they called the Cosmonaut for his flight. But it's got a slide rule bezel, so you can get real nerdy looking at that and using it to calculate the remaining fuel, distance, etc. In the pre-calculator days. I think in this photo you don't see it, but there's usually like a pi symbol on there, so that's always either strikes terror into many math students' hearts seeing the pi. Elvis Presley received a King Midas in 1970. Very funky watch. Not what you think of when you think of Rolex whatsoever. The coolest thing about the photo as well is in his left hand he's got the King Midas urn, which was this crazy box that looks like an ancient Greek vase. They sell for up to $15,000 just for that box now. So it's very special. But he was doing a concert in Houston, and the Houston Livestock Show officers gave him this watch. So those are like photos from then. That watch is still, I think, at Graceland. And that's a photo from there. This was the first wristwatch, as far as I know, with a sapphire crystal. Very distinctive design, integrated bracelet, incredibly heavy when you hold it because it's solid gold, but it's deceiving how heavy it is. Manual wind. The crown is on the left side of these watches, partially because in the Greek mythology, King Midas could not touch anything with his left hand because it would turn to gold. I think so. It was like the idea was you could wear it on your right hand. Just an incredibly funky watch. When a normal Rolex was about $200 in 1969 on a bracelet, this was over $2,000. So incredible thing, very unusual. These were basically forgotten for many years and have gotten extremely popular the last couple of years. So they've kind of tripled in price, I would say, over the last 5 years. This is a Hoyer Monaco that was worn by Steve McQueen in Le Mans, which was a 1971 movie. Another kind of mythology moment. No one really cared about this movie or the fact he wore a Hoyer back in the 1970s. It was kind of a failure at the box office. But in the 1990s, both Steve McQueen and Paul Newman had gotten very popular as kind of style icons and everything else. So they found these photos of him wearing it, and Tag Heuer reissued the watch in 1996, and then it kind of became popular, many years after it had first come out. The Monaco was one of the 3 automatic chronographs that Heuer introduced in 1969. It was really not meant for auto racing because there's no tachymeter on it. It was more of a design watch. And because I talked to Jack Heuer about it, because the company needed multiple watches for the movie, he had given them these because they were such bad sellers. And Steve had an array to pick from, but he thought these looked cool, not really realizing it was the design watch and not really a watch that a race car driver would wear. But he picked it anyways, and it's pretty cool. You'll see I'm pivoting kind of from people buying watches to the designer of these next two watches, the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, that was designed by Gerald Genta, integrated sport watch, steel, very unusual to have a steel watch that was very expensive, very popular. And basically 4 years later, he designed a very similar watch for Patek Philippe. In the interim, he had designed a similar watch for IWC. Pushing forward, because we're limited on time, Philippe Stern, who was the owner of Patek Philippe, he's still alive, his son runs it now, he basically created this watch when he first came in to Patek Philippe. It's a reference 3940, which is a perpetual calendar, but automatic and ultra thin. So you can see him wearing it. These have absolutely skyrocketed in value. Just to give you an example, in August 2024, I had 3 of these. This is called the Doré dial, which is like a golden pink dial. I basically listed them 3 weeks in a row, which was kind of nuts. They each sold between 180 and 190,000. That was in August 2024. One of the owners who purchased it in August 2024 came back to me in August 2025 and said, I just bought a house, there's a lot of renovations needed, I should probably sell it. They had a lot more interest in just a 12-month span, and I listed it for 290,000 and sold it for 290,000, so he did very well. But I wish I hadn't, because by December, just 4 months ago, one that was not as nice sold for 647,000 at auction. And another example, and just 2 weeks ago sold for over $1 million at auction. So just shows you, like, you know, astronomical, and I wish I had a crystal ball to know these things were happening. George Daniels did this watch. He only made 2 wristwatches in his life. Spring case tourbillon. This sold for over $4 million at auction. And he's kind of one of the original independent watchmakers, so he was making watches himself outside of the confines of a large Swiss watch company. He kind of paved the way for someone like F.P. Journe to make this watch. In 1993, he became an independent watchmaker. This was his 7th watch, but his 2nd wristwatch. And this one sold for over $7 million. In 2023, today, I think it could be $12 million. So we are honestly running out of time. I misjudged the talk, but I will skip. I want to talk about 2 things, actually, and then we have to get to questions and answers. This is the problem with condensing 2 decades into 45 minutes. Condition is the most important thing with collecting vintage watches. That watch on the left and that watch on the right are both 1958 Rolex Submariners. The watch on the left is what we commonly see when someone brings a vintage Submariner out that they may have inherited from their parents or purchased new in the military, etc. That watch has a number of different features than the watch on the right. The watch on the right is as found. It was found in a storage unit auction. The guy paid about $100 for the storage unit because it looked like tons of trash on the inside. You may have seen Storage Wars, just trash bags, etc. The estate that had the storage unit said, just sell it. We're not going to get caught up on the payments because it looked like trash was inside. There's nothing important. Someone bought it, went in the trash bags. This watch is in the box, and a bunch of Spanish gold coins, doubloons as well. The owner of the storage unit had hid his wealth in trash bags, basically, and kept the storage unit, and the estate was not happy. You can see it sold for 500,000 Swiss francs back around 2020 at auction. And the reason it went for so much was because it was basically preserved in brand new condition in the box. Now, what happens? You wear this watch, it needs service, maybe every 5 years. The timekeeping isn't good. You need to have someone take the watch apart, lubricate the parts, etc. During that service, typically Rolex or other manufacturers say, why don't we upgrade the watch with a new dial so it glows better at night? We'll upgrade the bezel because it's scratched up. We'll upgrade the bracelet to a newer bracelet that's thicker, etc. So they might take that watch on the right and turn it into that watch on the left, unbeknownst to the owner, they'll charge you thousands of dollars for the dial, the hands, the bezel insert, the bracelet, etc. And that watch on the left, I would probably pay, this was offered to me, I offered $8,000 for it. Could maybe sell it for 10 or 11. So I have dealt with many people over the years that have a great watch. They bring it back to the manufacturer. They think they're doing the right thing. The manufacturer polishes the watch, which people don't like. If I can have you take one thing away from this talk, please don't polish your watches. Tell them not to polish it, not to replace the parts. The brands often do not know how to take care of their own heritage because they're in the mentality to make the watch look like new, not in the mentality to preserve it in the original condition, which is what collectors want. So that's that. I do want to talk to you two things. If you want to learn more, you should. The second part of the talk is really captured in my 2 talks to the Horological Society of New York that are on YouTube. I did part 1 in 2019. It's an hour and a half. It has over 88,000 views, mostly because if you read the comments, I'm so boring that people would use that to put their kids to sleep every night. So I think at least 70,000 of those views are from parents using my voice to put their kids to sleep. But hopefully you'll enjoy it and learn a lot. Part 2 I gave in 2023, which was kind of a market update based post-COVID when the market really supercharged. We've done a few different videos on the Win Vintage YouTube channel. We have another coming out next week. So check out the Win Vintage YouTube channel. I did a number of kind of reference points videos about the history of the Submariner, how that changed over time, the GMT Master, the Explorer, and the Omega Speedmaster. You can sign up for my weekly newsletter, which includes Abby's picks of the week. Abby Harris is here from the Win Vintage team. You can see what she likes that we're listing every week, what I like, press mentions, etc. And you can subscribe to my podcast I do with my colleague Charlie Dunn in Florida. And you can pre-order the book that's coming out in November, Vintage Watches, The Modern Guide. This is not the actual cover with the tattoos, but I said if we sell 1 million copies, I will get the tattoos. And you can order it on Amazon now and on Target as well. And it's published by 10 Speed Press of Penguin Random House. And I've run a little over time, so we have time for questions. Please wait until the microphone is here before you ask questions.
I have the microphone. If we could also all please remember to hold the microphone very close to your mouth so that all the people on the Zoom can hear. Okay.
That was a great talk. It's really popular now to nickname watches, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the history of that. When did that sort of get started? Is it a new thing?
Yeah, I think the nickname, Paul Newman was definitely one of the original nicknames. In this right here, this is one of the more obscure nicknames, the Nina Rindt. She was a Jochen Rindt's wife. I've actually been in the same room as her. She's still alive. But she was wearing this Universal Genève Compax chronograph when she was timing his races in Formula One. Jochen was an Austrian Formula One race car driver who sadly passed away in a crash in 1971. So she was wearing this watch. When I first got into collecting, there were a couple of these on eBay. I was the underbidder on 2. One went for $2,300 and one went for $2,800. It had no nickname. It just kind of looked like a Paul Newman and was a great watch. Fast forward basically to 2015. 2013, a photo was discovered of her wearing the watch. It was then given the nickname the Nina Rindt after her. And by 2015, we had sold one at Christie's when I was there for $47,500. So I was kicking myself for not buying the 2 for under $3,000 each and having a very good return for 4 years' time. But that's kind of one of those nicknames. If you can go back and know when someone was wearing it, it's very interesting to see how that transforms a market because you can kind of relate to it in a different way. Wait for the microphone 1 second.
Who's-
Right, we got one in front. Yeah.
Do you know much about Art Deco designed watches besides Cartier?
Yeah, so the Reverso I showed is very Art Deco as well, with the lines, the clean kind of square
Yeah.
form. There are not a lot of Art Deco watches outside of certain Cartiers and
What
Jaeger.
about ones with enamel? Have you seen those?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and enamel dial watches. Here's one actually. Okay, right here. This watch on the left is the exact same reference as the watch on the right, but this was cloisonné enamel from the early 1950s. The watch dates to 1949. So the watch on the left, same exact reference, maybe $10,000 gold Rolex from the 1950s. This watch on the right sold in 2004 for $83,000. Then it came back for sale in 2013. It sold for $1.2 million. And then a few years after that, it sold privately for over $2 million. So it's worth more than $2 million today. So that shows you the price progression as well over a decade. But
Is that gold and it's polished?
so in fact, yeah, this is funny. So this is gold oxidation, which kind of looks purplish. It's just the oxygen reacting to different elements in the gold mixture because it's not pure gold. It's 18 karat, so 75% pure gold. Collectors actually love this, to see the kind of purple or
Oh, yeah.
blacks that can develop. That is would be a shame to wipe off because it takes typically a lot of time to do that. But that's another thing, people sometimes wipe off the oxidation and things, and collectors aren't too happy about that.
Thanks, Sarah. You talked a bit about how these watches' values fluctuate, sometimes very abruptly, due to various reasons. I'm wondering, like, of course, in your line of work, you have to pay attention to that closely. But how do you balance that against, like, maintaining your own sense of taste as an individual collector? Like, is that even possible?
It's possible if you do not look at Instagram, you do not talk to people, you do not look at forums. You know, the reality is there is such a herd element to collecting. You cannot be but affected by other people and their thoughts, and it's just interesting to see, okay, everyone thinks this is the coolest thing, and everyone thinks this is the coolest thing, and, you know, tastes do change. There are tastemakers that guide people. Often they are conflicted because they're promoting something they might own 40 of. And it happens, and unlike, you know, schemes with the SEC and stocks, there's no criminal behavior for people pumping up the prices of their own product. So it's hard, but it is cool to have something distinct, and it's not, I think it's not as fun to go to a dinner and all 20 people around the dinner are wearing the exact same watch. Personally, that happens sometimes, and then people are like, maybe I want to get something different. So individuality is important.
I'm going to jump in with a question from Zoom really quickly. Someone has a question about buying watches on eBay. Is it risky to buy online, and how can a non-expert make a purchase like this and not get ripped off?
It is risky. I don't buy stuff I don't know about on eBay. So there's the adage you'll hear in watches a lot of times is buy what you love, but I say actually buy what you know. You've got to be a real expert before you're buying. You can obviously kind of shortcut it by coming to winvintage.com, but you know, I don't just go out to flea markets and start buying collectible, very expensive stuff that I don't know about. I would think that's a recipe for disaster. eBay did put an authentication program in where watches are shipped to Ohio that are over $2,000, typically automatically for examination to see if the parts are authentic or not. They have missed things, no question. There was a watch that went through it recently with a fake dial, a Rolex Datejust that a friend got. You know, they're not like total experts, but they will catch a lot of stuff. So it is caveat emptor, as they say, buyer beware. You just have to be careful about where you're buying from, because the reality is, like, that Submariner I showed, I've run into people that have paid, $100,000 for that watch on the left, and it's worth $8,000 or $10,000, and there's no criminal action. If you overpay for something at a store, wherever it is, that's not really something you can go back to them with and say, I got ripped off. Like, if it's authentic parts, which they're actually authentic from Rolex, unless you have a bill of sale that says original dial, original all this stuff, which of course they're not going to give to you. It is a dangerous, dangerous hobby if you don't know what you're doing or you buy from the wrong person.
I have a personal question.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You went to Georgetown and majored in
Oh, should we wait for the microphone? Or? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, we've got we've got a question here, sorry.
I was just wondering.
Wait 1 second, you've got.
Just,
Yeah, it is.
sorry, excellent presentation. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
thank
I've always been a fan of Breitling watches, and
Mhm.
it was nice to see you mention it in there. But I don't know. I'm not a professional. I'm not even amateur. But I never see Breitling pop up as much. Can you just comment, like, what market are they aiming for these days? Are they still considered kind of a high value watch? Or thank you.
I love Breitling. They have an incredible history of chronographs as well. I really love a lot of their older watches from the 40s, 50s, 60s. I have a duograph that Owen serviced for me, which is a split-second watch that I think is one of the most beautiful chronographs ever made. I think I'm close with many people involved with Breitling and a big fan of their company. I'd love to come on as a consultant, but they own Universal Genève, so I'm on an advisory panel, so I'm kind of part of the Breitling family. They, I think, need to simplify their designs a little bit. They have excellent designs, an excellent catalog to draw from, but they opened a lot of boutiques. There was, in fact, a big Financial Times article about them a few weeks ago that their valuation was basically cut in half. They were worth $4 billion and had investment. They basically sold 75% of the company for $3 billion, and now it's worth like $2.3 billion is the best estimate of the value. So they probably opened too many boutiques, and they need to find their identity a little bit. But I would love to be part of that turnaround for sure. And they're amazing watches. I love them. They've got excellent models. I think it's a competitive field. You've got Rolex sucking up over half the market share. Rolex is in fact a nonprofit, Swiss nonprofit. There's a 5-hour podcast you can listen to if you're bored after you watch my 3 hours of HSNY talks. It's called Acquired. That's all the history of Rolex, how they focused on marketing and tennis and golf particularly, and kind of became the luxury brand. Over 80% of Americans were familiar with them by the late 70s, when if you tracked it in the 60s, like it was something like only 20% of Americans were familiar with Rolex. So that was really a huge time of growth for them. It's very interesting.
Got another question.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I really enjoyed the presentation. I'm a kind of a novice watch collector. I noticed you didn't touch on any of the Asian market, which Seiko goes back into the late 1800s, and now with Grand Seiko and the Spring Drive and what they're doing now, and the finishes are comparable or sometimes better than Rolex. Is it for time, or are you just focusing on European watches?
Well, I have a collaboration coming out with Seiko that you need to buy, coming out around June. It's going to say Win Vintage on the back, which is an incredible moment of honor for me. My dad wore a Seiko basically my whole childhood. The reality is most vintage Seikos are not that expensive. There's really cool watches. I almost put one in, Colonel Pogue wore a Seiko automatic chronograph with a gold dial during the Skylab missions, I think in the 70s. So now that watch is nicknamed the Colonel Pogue, but I sold one of the very best examples of a Colonel Pogue on Earth for $2,500. So it's not as exciting as a businessman selling those and finding them when it's really hard to find them. And then if you spend $1,000 servicing it, you've kind of eaten up all the margin. So they're fantastic watches. They're just not something I typically focus on. High-end Swiss watches are typically the $10,000 plus realm, particularly in the world of vintage watches. You know, one of the interesting things, if I was going to go into like a deeper history, American watchmaking was kind of preeminent in the 1800s, but we got kind of lazy, and Americans also always viewed European products as much more prestigious, even if we make a better product here in the luxury space. That's why we have Cartier, Louis Vuitton. Every kind of luxury brand we think of as French or English or something else. We also had tariffs that we tried to put in to protect the American watch industry, which kind of made them lazy. Also, it killed Detroit automotive as well, in my view. So tariffs really didn't help the American watchmaking industry. And the last fully American-made watch with an American in-house movement was 1969 until the last couple years. A friend of mine, Josh Shapiro, came out with a great watch called the Resurgence. And I have a collaboration with them as well if you'd like to buy one. But it's fully American designed, American made in California. So it's very, very exciting. And I think people just need to get over that American luxury goods aren't as good as anything made in France or whatever, because that's silly. So, yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Thanks for the talk. For those of us who have like maybe a family watch that we want to preserve and take good care of, what is the best way for us to do that? You're no polishing, and we can't go to Owen because he's busy. But like, what should we do?
You can email photos of it to info@winvintage.com. We will give you our best advice because there are different people with different expertise, and it can vary wildly from brand to brand, from type of watch to type of watch about who's best to service it. There are some people who really focus on Rolex that really only do Rolex. There are people that do chronographs specifically, people that do more complex watches. If it's a minute repeater, perpetual calendar, you might use someone else, more expensive obviously and intricate, but it's not something you want to just bring to the local watchmaker you find in the yellow pages necessarily. That's great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. I want to make one final plea, which is we're putting together a photo report on winvintage.com/blog. Abby is taking the photos, Abby Harris. So if you'd like your watch to get shot, she'll be out there for the photo report. We'd love to get as many watches as possible. So thank you. Oh, she'll just take the photo.